Can you hear me? Welcome, welcome, welcome to Beneath the Return of Monkey Island, this wonderful panel with these wonderful people about the wonderful game. My name is Paul. I'm going to be the host. I'm going to try not to talk too much. I'm going to want to introduce everyone. We have the game artist Zoe Van. We have co-designer and writer Dave Grossman. We have lead programmer David Fox. Art director Rex Crowle. And Ron Gilbert, creator and co-designer. So today the panel is an AMA, practically. You're going to get to ask questions. But before that, I guess most of us grew up playing these amazing games, and we kind of know everything about it, so let's not go into history. But one of the things that everybody's really curious about, like, how could you keep the secrecy? Like, nobody knew about this until you did that April Fool's joke thingy, and everyone's like, haha, yeah, okay. And then you did that at April 4th with a little teaser, and I think everybody's mind was blown, right? At least mine.
Yeah, it was very hard to keep a secret. You know, I think we were very excited about it, and we couldn't tell people. And a lot of people were working on the game and couldn't even tell their families about it, especially people who had small kids. You know, they just need to keep that quiet. But it was, you know, everybody on the team was great. You know, we didn't have any leaks or anything for that, and it was just about kind of instilling that. Being careful. Like, I had left Twitter earlier, so I didn't go back on Twitter. And so it was a little bit easier to not kind of let things leak. And if anybody was suspicious, I would just kind of let them think it was a Thimbleweed Park 2 that was being worked on. And that, you know, kind of got rid of the questions and stuff, yeah.
Also, I think a motivating factor for all of us was the stack of contracts that we all had to sign about this big, just detailing what would happen to us if we spilled anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people were looking after the little teaser. I know that a lot of people were looking forward to see Guybrush, to see Elaine again, LeChuck, and all those colorful characters. Right, so as I told you, this is an AMA. Prepare your questions. We have our very nice volunteers somewhere. I don't see them because of the lights. Just put your hands up, hope to be chosen. There you go. And get a microphone. Speedy.
Good morning. I know writing endings is very difficult, and I haven't written mine yet. So I'd be interested, at what point in the development stage did you write the ending for Return to Monkey Island?
Well, I mean, the actual details of it came, you know, fairly late. Not last minute, but fairly late. And that was all, you know, kind of extended from the end of Monkey Island 2, which I did do incredibly late. I went a large chunk of that project not knowing what that ending was going to be. So that ending was kind of done very late. But Dave and I, one of the first things that Dave and I talked about with Return to Monkey Island was the ending. And I knew that I wanted to start the game right at the end of Monkey Island 2, you know, in the amusement park. And the other thing about the ending is the ending, you know, with Guybrush and being in an amusement park was not something we just made up then. That was actually when I was first conceiving the game back in 1989. That was the secret of Monkey Island, that Guybrush was in an amusement park. And so I had been asked over the years continually, like, what is the secret of Monkey Island? Like, this is the most common question I would get asked. And this really is the secret of Monkey Island. It's that Guybrush was in an amusement park. And so, you know, that ending is kind of very honest in a way. because it really is the secret. We had to, massage it and change it and stuff, but that is, the honest to God secret of Monkey Island.
I think of it as like having gotten a tattoo in your 20s, and then in your 50s you have to explain it to somebody.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello. It's about the genre of the game. Like, if you were to make a Monkey Island in a different genre, what would be your favorite? And I guess that's for everyone.
I think if I was going to do one, it would be Guybrush kart racing. No, seriously, I've wanted to make one, kind of like Mario Kart with Guybrush and the carts and LeChuck chasing him around. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So yeah, we also appreciate a lot the art of the game. I think it was absolutely beautiful, and it really, the colors came out, and there was vivid. And seeing Melee Island after, I don't know, 30 years, how much, I don't know. It was absolutely beautiful. Like, Zoe, how was it to recreate these places?
I think that it was a lot of fun. I mean, this project was the most fun project I've ever worked on, and this team is so much fun to work with. Rex's style was perfect for the game itself, and I think that we really wanted to respect how people interacted with these environments through the years and how nostalgic they felt about them. So it was really about figuring out what the landmarks were, what were the little pieces of story that everyone connected with, so that you could still feel that warm feeling of coming back to a place, even though the place has changed. Both, it's a new generation, basically, and for me, that was super fun to explore, and I felt really, I think we all really cared about recreating these environments. Right,
So,
Rex?
When it comes to character design, like,
yeah, I mean, because it's kind of a weird story how I ended up on this project. I don't know if anyone knows about this, but I think probably at 12, maybe 14 years ago, I was making games at Media Molecule, and just in my lunch break, I painted a picture of Guybrush. It was just after the special edition had been announced. I saw that version of Guybrush. And it was really interesting to see it, but as artists, you always want to respond to stuff you're seeing. And I was just like, oh, how would I do Guybrush? So I just painted this super blocky version of him, kind of thinking about how you would translate pixel art into a sort of high resolution painting, but not by doing every worry line and crow's feet and all of the details on someone's face, but how would you still keep that very iconic look? And I painted that with sort of hand paint brushes, and I stuck it up online, and Ron saw it and appeared to really like it, unless he's been lying to me for a decade.
You emailed it to me.
I think I put it on maybe Twitter or somewhere.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And I sent Ron a version of that to put on his desktop wallpaper, and did not think about it for at least a decade. And then I got a phone call out of the blue, Ron asking, what are you up to now? And I mean, we'd had this interaction, but at no point did I think there'll be a new Monkey Island game. So, we chatted a bit, and it was only when I signed one of those giant legal documents that was as tall as I am, that I found out, and I just fell off my chair. It was just so exciting, and just the opportunity to take these such iconic characters and environments and see what we could do with them, give them a new spin for a new audience, but also, as Zoe was saying, just really bring out those kind of warm feelings that everyone has for this beloved franchise.
Yeah. Do we have another question, or
Hi. During production, what was your favorite problem that you solved? That would be a question for all of you.
Favorite problem? There were no problems. Smooth sailing the whole way. I think one of my favorite things was how to go from the end of Monkey Island 2 to the beginning of this. Because I knew I wanted to start the game at the end of Monkey Island 2, but that's, that ending, it's really left. You don't really know what's happening. Is it a spell that Chuck has put on Guybrush? Is it actually true? And how to kind of segue from that. And I think it was, I don't remember who came up with it, but the idea of Guybrush's son, Boy Brush, and the two of them, sitting on the bench together. It's like once we had that, everything just fell into place for me. But I think that was probably the most interesting problem to solve.
So for me, I think immediately of the problems that were in areas of coding that were really complicated and kept on coming back as bugs because I fix it and break something else. And so at the very end, when it actually did work, it was really good. And two areas I'm thinking of is might be mild spoilers here, in the museum, dealing with how you get the various things you need to get in the museum and getting the timing correct and all the things that I had to do. And then, of course, it would work perfectly when I did it, and the playtester would come in and do it and find 5 things that were broken. And the other was the fish eating contest. And both of those were pretty complex, but when they worked, it was just really fun to see it, especially adding the final animation to the fish eating contest was really fun.
I think that, I like to solve problems with creatures. So I think that for me, one of the funnest problems to solve was making Melee Forest feel alive, because Melee Forest is, it's a maze, so it's pretty big, and we wanted it to feel creepy still. So Cody, one of the animators, and we started pitching, adding some of the creatures, and they were all nightly creatures. But once Guybrush arrives at the mop tree, it needed to look really cozy and nice, and we were like, we can't really put just like snakes and frogs and bats here. It won't feel like very welcoming. So we were able to pitch different creatures like the short deer and all of these, there's like a porcupine family, and all of these little creatures have little stories in the mop tree's environment. And once the mop tree, this is a spoiler, but once the mop tree dies, they all start crying in very different ways for very different reasons. And there's this old squirrel on one of the branches, which is playing with a firefly. And we thought to ourselves that they were best friends. And when the mop tree dies, the firefly's gone. That was definitely one of my favorite problems to solve with animals.
There's a lot of tragedy among the fun. So when it came to writing, Dave, tell us about the exciting...
I had 2 things in my mind, and the first thing I thought of was just the relationship between Guybrush and Elaine, which is something that was sort of not really working well for about 2/3 of production. We had put it sort of in the center of some of the other conflicts of the story, and so neither one of them was coming off very well, and they were sort of antagonizing each other a little bit, and it just didn't feel right. Every time we played it, or every time we had somebody else play it, it was
I think
don't like
some
that.
of the testers thought that Guybrush and Elaine were about to get divorced.
Exactly. We just didn't like that, and I think we sort of moved it out of the firing line of the main plot and made them more supportive of each other. And finally, after about 5 or 6 revisions of every scene they have together, it was finally working. So that was good. I'm glad we got that squared away.
Because one of the things what was really appreciated was when you actually can join the crew of LeChuck and can be part of that as the zombie guy rush. That was a really cool idea. Like creating all these characters for the Chuck, because before we only saw Bob and so on. Can you tell us about how this little group?
Well, and that came out of our first meeting about the game. We were kind of talking about, what's basically going to be about, what themes do we want to cover, and what are some fun ideas that we put in there. And we were both like, oh yeah, you should meet all the Chuck's crew. They've always been kind of nobody, and we'd love to kind of see them. And I did a document early on that was what's life like on that ship, and almost none of it is in the game. But we did, it was a first zero draft. Like we didn't actually even start working on the game for another 6 months after we put this in paper. But one of the characters, Ian Rose, is in there, sort of halfway like her current self. And then once we got into that section of the game, like that's the chapter that we started work on first because we felt the strongest about it.
It was very contained too.
It's contained, and we sort of knew what we wanted out of it, and so we just kind of started writing. The characters just come out as you work on them, and you sort of thumbnail them first, which is really fun. You just kind of go around. Each dialogue is like, hi, I have basically this sort of attitude to you, and I give you these bits of information, and maybe I make some jokes about this, and then you walk to the next character, and they do something like that. And then as you fill in all the details, they become people, and I started having different favorites as that went along, and so for a while, like Flair Gory was my favorite character in the game, and ultimately Putra, the cook, became the best one. I just think she has sort of the most to say. I think that's why I like her best.
Yeah, I was watching, right before I started working on this game, I was watching Black Flags, the
Black
TV
Sails,
show.
you mean.
Sails,
Yeah.
Black Sails. And one of the things that I found interesting about this show was they were all pirate crews, but they all voted on everything. Where they were going to go or what they were going to do, there was a vote. And I thought that would be really interesting if that was true for Chuck's crew as well. I mean, he's a fearsome pirate, but his crew still has to vote on stuff. And so that, became an integral part of the puzzles that you do on the Chuck ship, was that.
Yeah, LeChuck's crew with their character designs were just a real joy to work with. I mean, those descriptions were just so good. As an artist, you're just like, I get to do like a zombie chef. This is going to be amazing. And, for each character, I'd generally make a sheet of quick sketches, and then we'd work through them together and figure out which ones we'd like and move those on a bit further. And I think all of the crew, that team all came together very quickly. Putra was a really fun one, the zombie chef, because she's kind of, I think if you're a zombie, you're kind of made of food. And it was really fun to start to go, well, maybe she's just kind of eating her own lips away while she's working on, a recipe, or just pulling a bit of skin off and just flavoring the casserole with that, or and there were versions of Putra where she'd actually had accidents and been chopped up and then put back together again in the wrong order, and those were fun as well. So. I think Putra and Iron Rose, she was a really strong character. I really like Flambe as well, the demon who's kind of on fire, and it was fun to put a little moustache on him and just have it smoking on the corners. And the animators had a really good time with making his hair like a constant flame. So yeah, that was really good.
I wanted to say that there's so much of what ended up in the game came from the inspiration of the artists, and there's a scene with Putra's mixing something and pulling a worm out of her head and dropping it for seasoning into the sauce. And I don't think that was defined anywhere. I think that was the animator who came up with that. And Zoe had a great one in the fish shop with with the lump sucker. And spoiler, but close your ears if you don't want to hear this. It's minor. It's more of an achievement. But there's one lump sucker, little yellow fish on the ground, and Zoe's idea was that it would, every time you come into the shop, it would be an inch closer to the door. And if you keep on coming and going X number of times, it would be gone, and you get an achievement. And I just. What?
Escaped.
Escaped, yeah. You don't see it escape, but you realize it's gone. And just, things like that where everyone on the team was contributing all sorts of ideas that, just made the whole thing feel much more alive.
And when I talked about, sorry.
A lot of ideas, for any project I work on have always come from the artists and the art they draw. So much of the first two Monkey Island games were weird stuff that Steve Purcell drew. He'd just draw something weird, and that would then set us off on, we should do something with it. And so the artists are just invaluable, in the creative input to the game.
Yeah, I feel like that was a really interesting part about this project, that we were able to show different pitches for how to add a little detail to different stories that we hadn't thought about before after setting up the layout, and also how those ideas developed afterwards. Like the lump sucker, for example, I thought you open the door 3 times and then you helped it escape, and then you're like, no, you need to do it 72 times. It'll move a couple pixels and someone will notice.
The other one I loved was the whole bit with blowing up the blowfish in the contest. And that was purely the animator. I don't know if was it Fabian?
I can't remember.
I think it was Cody.
Cody?
Yeah.
Usually you're supposed to blow up a blowfish by blowing into its mouth. And I'm not sure if he was being lazy because he didn't have a version of the blowfish from the back. So he just had the blowfish facing the camera, and he blew it up from the back end. And the expression on the blowfish when it's being blown up was just great. So,
but that ended up just being so Guybrush, right? It's exactly what you would expect Guybrush to do. So it worked out well.
Yeah, it also flipped around the other way with the inspiration. For speaking as the art team, I've often worked on games that are quite experimental, and they come together in the last month, and nobody really knows what they're making until the end. But this it was incredible for just the amount of detail that we had. Every character had a full biography. We had a full sort of database that you could just almost play the game within, just sort of like a Wikipedia almost. And that was really invaluable for us to just get so much inspiration when we were in the early days of the project, particularly.
Any questions? Oh my God, many questions.
One of the things that always comes into my mind with Monkey Island is its unique brand of humor that really sets it apart. So I'm just curious about what goes into writing the gags and jokes in Monkey Island.
Wow. I think of comedy, at least our brand, as a form of caricature. So I think we're usually just like a character artist would take some feature, like somebody has a big nose, you make it bigger. They have small ears, you make them smaller. We do the same thing with social characteristics of the characters and parts of the society that we're referencing, these kinds of things. And we're always essentially writing about ourselves. The first Monkey Island game is there's a young guy and he's got a new career he's really excited about, and he's sort of going out and trying to make his mark, and meets a woman and decides she's maybe more important, and then the second game is sort of all about trying to make a sequel, which is what we were doing then. And when we got together and we were talking about what this game was going to be about, there was a lot of we're older guys now in an industry that's changing, and we don't understand how everything works anymore, and we wanted to kind of put Guybrush in the same space. And so, a lot just comes out of that. It just starts falling out as you start writing the characters and the scenes. You do it sort of layer by layer, and it hopefully gets funnier and funnier every time you revise it. You sort of get rid of the stuff that's not working, and you have one or two more ideas, and you pick the best ones, and you put them in, and then you're done, and you ship it.
I think a lot of it is also, for me, when I was doing writing, it's like I would write something and I'd want to see if Dave laughed at it, right? That was an important metric. It's like, I'm going to write this, and if Dave goes, oh, that's really funny, then I know that it's a good thing. So there's a little bit that there were some things that I would put in the game, and then I wouldn't really tell the testers about it, and I'd kind of wait to see what their reaction was to it. Did they think it was funny? So there's some of that kind of trying to impress the other team members helps a lot with the comedy.
It's actually helpful, I think, for us that you and I are both notoriously really stone-faced. It's hard to get a laugh out of either one of us. And I remember Fabiano Caputo, one of the animators, came on the project, and the very first thing he worked on was an animation. It's not in the game, actually. It's an animation of a squid getting a live squid getting its tentacle cut off, and the expression on the squid's face is that just the eyes bug out, and they do it like the timing is impeccable, the motion is perfect, and you and I both gave a gut laugh when he showed that the first time. We're like, oh yeah, okay, this is gonna work out good.
Do you have like a favorite scene from the game, like the one that?
I like the one Zoe was talking about with the tree, and that was, you know, the spec is, oh, he cuts down the tree and it's horrible, and then there was a while we were working on it and there were sort of storyboards happening and animations happening, and everybody was like, you know, I think afraid to take it too far, and so every day sort of the feedback was, yeah, that's great, let's have some more, let's make it go on longer, and you know, so yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Because Return to Monkey Island had so many colorful characters, but I was always obsessed with Stan and that marketing talk. So when you guys was writing that, how, like research-wise, how did that go? Just
well, I could not write Stan. It's like I tried some Stan. There's a way that he phrases things that I could not find a voice for. So I was really happy to hand that all over to Dave because he did a great job of Stan. And it was also nice because Stan was one of the dialogues that I could read the stuff that went into the game new, and it was all fresh to me. It's like I could laugh at it not knowing what it was because I did not work on Stan at all.
Yeah, I mean, you said research, but I think the research that went into that is I've been making games for almost 35 years, and I have experienced some marketing, and I sort of know how it works. And are you talking specifically about the scene where they make the flyer? Because that's
almost any scene. You know, it is always trying to tell you something.
The scene where they make the flyer, I will say, if you haven't played that with the writer's cut button turned on, there is an extra piece or two that are in there. Kind of just more. It's just more of that stuff. So.
I wanted to say something about the writer's cut button, which I thought was brilliant, and that, you know, Dave would often write scenes long, I guess, and
I do that.
It was too painful to cut. So having code around it. First, the code was around it just to keep it from running, but you didn't delete the code. And then it became an option that you could turn on or turn off, and I think that's the way you should play the game with it on, so you get all the good stuff. Although, you know, sometimes it does make a scene go a little longer than maybe it had to, but I like it.
It really is a personal preference. You know, some people just they don't care about all the words and stuff. They just want to do the puzzles and get through the game. And so we tried to make things, you know, a little bit shorter for those people. But then as we were cutting stuff, we sort of realized some of this stuff really just should go. But some of it is actually like, it's revealing of character, or it's, you know, this extra beat is actually really fun, or, you know, this entire conversation is thematically appropriate. And so we were like, well, we want to kind of leave those in, but not leave them in. And so then we decided to just have a bit that you can flip. It's like, if you want to watch these things, you can. And if you don't, turn them off.
Next question. I'm not going to point here.
Hi. We heard how Rex joined the team, so I would like to hear a little bit more about the origin story of this game. So did Mr. Eichner call you and say, like, get the band together, let's do it again? Or how did you all join the team? How did this start?
Well, it started with me, and I had, at PAX, I think it was PAX 2019, I had gotten together with somebody who runs Devolver, and we were just having coffee, and Nigel is his name, he had mentioned that he has a good friend that was the head of something at Disney, some vice president at Disney, And he thought that they could maybe be able to get the Monkey Island license, and was I interested in doing another Monkey Island if they could get the license to do that. And I thought about that for, probably a good 2 or 3 months about whether it was something I really wanted to do. And I called up Dave, and we talked about it, and Dave flew up to Seattle for a weekend, and we just kind of hashed everything through that if we were going to make this game, what would it be? Because the thing I didn't want to do is I didn't want to just kind of make another Monkey Island, that Guybrush battles LeChuck and the lane is there, and just that's not interesting to me. So I wanted to make sure that we had something to say. And so after Dave and I spent that weekend together and kind of just mapped everything out at a very high level, I thought, okay, we have something to say. This is an interesting story. So then I went back to Devolver and I said, okay, let's do this. And then it was another almost 9 months of just contract negotiations, with Disney to try to get this thing. In the meantime, it's David and I built a whole nother game, which was Dolores, just while that was going on. And once I knew it was a real project, then, I talked to Rex and David about it.
For me, when COVID hit first was when Ron came to me and said, hey, let's do this throwaway game or this free game for everyone who's locked down, and we're going to have a new engine for this possible game I'm working on. I can't tell you anything more at this time, but let's just take the assets from Thimbleweed Park and make a little game that we could throw together in a couple months and give away. And it was really the same engine that we ended up using for Monkey Island, but it was earlier version of it. But we got to test some things with user interface and alternates, rather than having the verb interface do something different. And I already knew from talks we had maybe 10 years earlier that the chance of ever doing any one of our games once Disney bought the company was essentially zero, because they weren't going to talk to small companies like individuals or companies. So it was never in my consciousness that we'd ever do that. And so when Ron said, okay, here's an NDA you got to sign, and I knew he was working on a new game project. I assumed it was like a Thimbleweed Park 3 or 2 or whatever. and I remember, we must have done a video call, because I think he wanted to see my expression when he gave me the news. And I think I got a bruise on my chin when it hit my desk. And I was at LucasArts when the first game was made, but I was in management at that point. And so I supported the game with resources, but I wasn't actually on the team. And that was, the first 2 Monkey Island games were my favorite games of all time. So to be given the opportunity to join a team and actually create it and work on it was just really super exciting for me. So I said yes.
For me, I applied for Rex's job, and but super happy that Rex was the art director, because you were the best art director for this project for sure, and I really loved being a game artist on this game, like being able to pitch all of these ideas and work with storyboard artists like Sarah and artists like Rhonda and Dev. And I mean, when I first applied, since I started making games, I wanted to make point-and-click adventures, and everyone here has made games that have inspired me to make games. I grew up playing the Humongous games as a kid, Pajama Sam and Spy Fox, and I'm really glad that I didn't know that when I was doing the test, because I would have just died. So yeah, that's how I got on.
Yeah, it was quite hard to hire people because it was so secretive. So it was like hiring someone to the CIA or something. It was like, hey, nice artwork you've got there. Give me a call sometime, or meet them in a, well, no, we couldn't because it was locked down. But meet me in a smoky Zoom call, and I put together an art test. Me and Zoe were reminiscing about it this morning. Of showing like an example environment and then asking the artist to figure out what was the external version of that scene. But it was tricky because obviously as soon as you put anything like period, you know, like 18th century or piratey or sea or anything like that, instantly you're like, okay, right, this looks a little bit like Monkey Island. So it actually ended up, the scene that I painted was the interior of a delicatessen in Switzerland, because that felt that it could still have some like wooden beams and some like, you know, interesting environment, different types of food, things that you'd want to click and pull apart and puzzle with, but no one would draw a comparison with Monkey Island. And then Zoe knocked it out of the park, as did all the other artists, with coming up with an external version.
We all want to make it. Make the Switzerland game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all know that we got back the voice of Guybrush Threepwood, and you told me that working with him was really fun. Can you tell us about, like, how was direct?
Me, I was the one you were talking to about that, right?
What?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I said to Paul was that the great thing about Dominic Armato is that he understands somehow implicitly that Guybrush is a really sort of a compressed character. Like his range is really small. He doesn't get too excited. He doesn't get too depressed. He sort of stays in this middle ground so that all the other crazy characters can play off of him. And then when you get him in the studio, he will give you like 8 gradations of everything between this like tiny, narrow range and just make it, he's so subtle and so amazing that I just love him.
Yeah, he's good. There were lines that, you know, Dave and I had written that, you know, Dominic would read them and he'd go, no, Guybrush wouldn't say that. And he'd rephrase it, and it was better. He was right, you know, that the way that he would phrase stuff was often better because he kind of understood that character. You know, Dave and I understand those characters at a writer's level, but I think Dom understood Guybrush at an actor's level, and I think there's a kind of different level of understanding those two things.
Cool. Questions? Choose you.
Hi. Yeah, how early did you decide not to ignore the sequels you didn't work on? And was it an exciting writing challenge, actually building upon things that you didn't invent and having them in the game as well?
Yeah, we were very careful to not discount any of that stuff. It's like there's a lot of stuff that appeared in the other games that Dave and I didn't work on that is still considered canon, right? And we didn't want to just throw all that stuff out. Like, I mean, for example, it's like in my mind, Guybrush and Elaine never ever would have gotten married. It's like they didn't have that relationship. But they got married in Curse of Monkey Island, and I mean, short of me divorcing them in the first scene of Return to Monkey Island, it's something that we have to do. And so there were a lot of things that, you know, we kind of had to do, and we're happy to do. I mean, I don't think there's anything that, you know, we just absolutely hate that appeared in those games. But it's just kind of a fine line of being respectful of the canon of the people have created, but also being able to do new stuff that you want to do.
And then there was Murray, who came in, who was like a significant character from one of the later games, the third one.
Right, yeah.
And he was great. You know, the talking skull, which I adopted. We had in Slack, we had lots of Slack. We use Slack as a central place for meetings and kind of discussions, and most of us came up with our Monkey Islandified name. So I was David the Talking Skull. It was my Slack name, because I like Murray.
I was Ron Brush.
I was LeDave, of course.
We missed the train.
Although nearly everyone's avatars, I think, were characters from the game, so
yeah, that's true.
Contributed that way.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hello. So my name is Elad. I'm an aspiring game designer, but my background is in filmmaking. And I was wondering if there were any serious attempts to adapt Monkey Island into a movie, either live action or animated. And yeah, if so, why didn't they go through? And who would you cast
Pirates
for
of
the main part?
I think Pirates of the Caribbean was based on Monkey Island.
No, it's kind of it's a circular thing there. I know there was a movie after I had left that they started to do. I know Steve Purcell did some art for it, but I don't really know what happened, why it was canceled. I would really worry about like a movie or a cartoon or anything on Monkey Island, mostly because of Guybrush's character. Like I think he works well in an interactive medium where the player can kind of identify through him. But I would worry if there was a Monkey Island cartoon or TV show that Guybrush would just turn into too much of a buffoon. And he's not a buffoon at all. He causes a lot of damage, but he always has really good intentions for the stuff he does. And I'm not convinced that would translate onto film well. I mean, it could be proved wrong, but that would kind of worry me about a movie. Or it would just become the Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Did you have any reservations of that because of that Maniac Mansion TV show that was so terrible?
I could give a whole talk on that.
Next time. I think one of the things that was not there was no question about here was, it's been so many years, and this game has a completely different way how people are interacting with Guybrush and so on. We have a hint system, achievements. Mr. Fox, can you tell us something about that?
About the hint systems and achievements. Well, I didn't work on either of those. So as the lead game programmer, there were 3 other programmers that did different tasks in implementing the game, and some of it I oversaw, some of it they were like totally on their own doing it. And what I would like to say, something we talked about earlier, was the process of making the game. Did the same thing in Thimbleweed Park, where we kind of did it in multiple layers, essentially, where the first time we did programmer art with all the rooms and all the locations where you could walk from one to the other and actually kind of play through the game with programmer art, and then artist art that was very simplified, very low, not a lot of detail. And then each time we would add more layers and more detail and more polish. And that way, when we realized early on which scenes we could cut or which rooms we could cut, there wasn't a lot of expensive art time that was invested in creating those, or programmer time. And I thought that was a brilliant way to build the game, since you weren't like, let's start with Melee and do all 10 levels of polish up to special effects at the end. It was the whole game kind of got a treatment with more animation, more finer detailed art, paths to make sure the art matched, because each different artists had, and you could talk more about that, different artists had different styles, and then Rex was in charge of making sure that the game felt cohesive as you went from place to place. And that was good, because you got an much earlier experience of playing the game, and then just adding more and more animation, or like when we do cutscenes, those were all storyboarded, and we'd have a version of a cutscene where it was just a bunch of animatic with storyboards, one after another with text, and those got refined, and we saw where we could make it shorter, we had to extend it, and finally animation was added after all that was done.
Questions?
After the credits of Return, and sorry for the spoilers who didn't finish the game, you implemented this nice personal letter of both of you. And I was wondering, when you're looking back and reading this letter today, do you think you reached what you want to reach? Did you told what you want to tell?
Yeah, I mean, that letter is really interesting, because we had kind of gotten to the point of the ending, and neither Dave or I were really happy with how that the very, very, very end of the ending was landing with people. And I remember having a call with Dave, and we were just talking about, well, what do we kind of do at the very, very end of this thing to make it work? And then David mentioned that when we started the project, he had written a letter, letter to himself about what he wanted to accomplish. And so he said, well, let me just pull out this letter. Maybe this letter will help us figure that out. And he read the letter, and I thought, let's put that in the game, because it was perfect. It just encapsulated everything that we had been thinking about the game, and we had been thinking about the whole Monkey Island franchise in a way. So I mean, we cleaned up the letter a little bit, but that is pretty much exactly the letter that Dave had written. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, it was like a time capsule that they had done. And I think, looking at it now, the gist of that was, I think we're going to sort of get what we want, but it won't be exactly what we expect. And,
Right.
and yeah, I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Oh, yeah. So my question is kind of about the art of the game. So I think it works really well for what you wanted to achieve, but obviously when you first showed off the game, there was some negative reception to it. So I'm kind of curious to know how you handled this in your team. Were you completely confident in your vision? Was there a bit of trepidation? How did this go internally?
I was totally confident. It's like I knew that the stuff that Rex had done, that was exactly what I wanted to do. So hearing all that negative feedback, it definitely hurt. It's like I'm not going to say it didn't, but I never once doubted that the way that Rex and Zoe and everyone else had done it was the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think kind of like I was saying a little bit earlier, with my first version of Guybrush, that all art reacts to other art, and I think it's good to make things that are provocative and get a reaction from people, and sometimes that can inspire people to do their own thing, but I was very happy with what we achieved, and I think if we hadn't had the original creators of the game, it would have felt a little bit more awkward of just like, oh no, are we going, we're just a young team, are we going in the wrong direction? But having the series creators with us, backing us up and being there for every decision, we had full confidence that, of course this is a Monkey Island game, it can't be without, without this team, so yeah.
And the style was so appropriate for what we were making. I remember in the first days where I started working with you, you talked about how the priority was really making sure that the player knows what to do and where to look, and is the story being told over being realistic, and that's really the kind of style that I find really fun to work with, and I think that everyone on the art team really responded to that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, to me, making a game visually successfully is when you can really feel everyone's personality come together in a game, and I really feel that we achieved that. When I look at the game, I always remember yeah, this is when this happened, and we were all doing this and laughing about this, and it's super enjoyable to walk through, and I think that can be felt. I'm super happy with how it looks.
Last question, please. Yes. He said no more question.
That's not correct. You have the possibility for questions, but not here. But if you go outside and to the right, there will be the possibility for questions, and I've got some markers. So, yes.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you. I hope everyone had fun tonight, today. Have fun at Devcom and see you out there. Bye.
you.